What would you do if you came home to grab your passport and heard your husband's voice revealing a filthy secret that shattered everything? Would you stay silent or explode? And what happens when you don't react immediately? But wait, this isn't just another cheating story. This is the awakening of a woman who was once gentle and invisible until she decided to turn silence into power. My name is Margaret Ellison, and I've been married to Derek for 18 years. At 44, I thought I knew everything about quiet desperation. I was wrong. The morning of September 15th started like any other Tuesday at Crestline Solutions, where I've worked in administration for the past decade. My desk faced the window overlooking Hamilton Grove's Main Street, where nothing ever changed and nothing ever would. Or so I believed. Margaret, you're all set for the Portland conference. My supervisor, Janet, stopped by my cubicle with her usual efficiency. Flight leaves at 3:30. I nodded, patting my purse automatically. Everything's ready, just need to grab my passport from home on the way. The conference was meant to be a small adventure, my first business trip in 10 years, combined with a weekend visit to my college roommate, Emily March. Emily had been urging me to visit her in Oregon for months, and when this conference opportunity arose, it seemed like a sign. Derek barely looked up from his phone when I mentioned it at breakfast. He was a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, always on calls, always distracted. His dark hair was perfectly styled as always, his tie expensive, his manner dismissive. "How long will you be gone?" he asked, thumb scrolling through emails. 3 days, back Thursday evening. Fine, I'll probably work late anyway. That should have been my first clue. Derek never worked late on weekdays. He preferred his evenings free, his weekends unstructured. But I was too focused on my own small rebellion to notice. The drive home from the office took 15 minutes through Hamilton Grove's tree-lined streets. Our house sat on Maple Avenue, a modest colonial with blue shutters that I'd painted myself 3 summers ago. Derek had complained about the color, said it was too bold. Now I wondered if he'd found someone who didn't paint shutters the wrong shade of blue. I parked in the driveway, noting Derek's car wasn't there. Good. I could grab my passport and leave without another awkward conversation about travel plans he clearly didn't care about. My key turned in the lock with its familiar click. The house felt different, warmer, somehow, more lived in. I attributed it to my pre-travel nerves and headed upstairs to our bedroom. The passport was in my nightstand drawer, exactly where I'd left it. As I reached for it, Derek's voice drifted from his home office across the hall. "No, baby, she's at the airport by now. We have at least 4 hours." I froze. Derek was supposed to be at work. The office was meant to be empty. "God, I can't wait to get my hands on you again." His voice continued, lower now, intimate. "Last night wasn't enough. Kitten, it's never enough." The passport felt heavy in my hand. My legs refused to move. Through the thin wall, I could hear Derek's laughter, genuine, warm, alive in a way I hadn't heard in years. "She won't be back until Thursday. We could spend the whole day in bed tomorrow if you want." The words hit like ice water. Derek thought I was gone. He'd planned this. "You're so much better than her, Natalie, so much more responsive, so much more." His voice dropped to a whisper I couldn't quite catch. "Natalie." The name carved itself into my chest. I knew a Natalie, Derek's new assistant, barely 25, with glossy black hair and the kind of laugh that made men turn their heads. She'd been to our house for the company barbecue last month, complimenting my potato salad while Derek refilled her wine glass. "I have to go," Derek was saying now. "But tonight, after she calls to check in, come over. Wear that thing I bought you." My hand found the bedroom door frame. I needed to steady myself, to breathe, to think. But all I could do was listen as my husband made plans to betray me in our own home. "I love you too, baby. More than I've ever loved anyone." The call ended. Footsteps moved across the office floor. I heard Derek's chair creak as he settled back into it, probably to continue his workday as if nothing had happened. I should have stormed in there. should have demanded answers, thrown accusations, made him face what he'd done. Instead, I stood frozen in my own bedroom, holding a passport to a trip that suddenly seemed like an escape route rather than an adventure. Quietly, carefully, I backed out of the room. My feet found the stairs, my hands found the car keys. My body moved through the motions of leaving while my mind screamed static. The drive to the airport blurred past. I parked in long-term parking, checked my bag, went through security, found my gate. All automatic, all numb. When Emily called to confirm my arrival time, I heard my own voice responding normally, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The woman who'd left Hamilton Grove that morning was gone. In her place sat someone harder, someone calculating, someone who'd learned that silence could be a weapon if wielded correctly. The flight to Portland gave me 3 hours to think. I stared out the window at clouds that looked like cotton balls and made lists in my head. Not lists of confrontations or divorce lawyers or ways to salvage my marriage. Lists of information I needed. Financial records, phone bills, credit card statements, the methodical gathering of evidence. By the time we landed, I had a plan. Not for revenge, not yet, but for truth. For the kind of clarity that comes only when you know exactly where you stand. Emily met me at baggage claim, her red hair bright as a flag, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Margaret, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said, and meant it. The ghost of my marriage, the ghost of my trust, the ghost of the woman I'd been that morning. We drove to Blue Water Bay Inn in relative silence. Emily tried small talk about the conference, about the weather, about her job at the environmental nonprofit. I responded when necessary. But my mind was elsewhere, calculating. Derek would call tonight to check in. He'd ask about my day, pretend to care about my flight. Then he'd hang up and call Natalie, invite her over, take her to our bed. The bed where I'd slept next to him for 18 years, where I'd comforted him through his father's death, where I'd tried unsuccessfully to conceive the children we'd never had. "Okay, that's enough," Emily said as we settled into our adjoining rooms. "Talk to me." "What happened?" I told her. Not everything, not about the passport, not about the frozen moment in our bedroom. But enough. Derek was cheating. I'd found out. I didn't know what to do. Emily's reaction was predictable. "You have to leave him, Margaret. You can't stay married to someone who treats you like this." "It's not that simple. 18 years. Emily. Our house, our life, our..." "Your what? Your happiness? When was the last time you were actually happy with him?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Derek and I had settled into a routine years ago. We were roommates who shared a mortgage and a last name. We were polite strangers who happened to sleep in the same bed. "I need to think," I said. "Promise me you won't just go back and pretend nothing happened. Promise me you'll do something." "I promise." But what I was planning wasn't what Emily had in mind. The next morning, I called Derek while Emily was at her morning yoga class. He answered on the second ring, his voice carefully concerned. "Hey, honey. How's the conference?" "Fine. Boring presentations, mediocre coffee, the usual." "And your friend, Elena?" "Emily," I corrected. "She's good. We're having dinner tonight." "That's nice. I'm glad you're getting some time away." Such a caring husband. Such a devoted partner. If I hadn't heard him planning his evening with Natalie, I might have believed his performance. "What are you up to today?" I asked. "Just work. Might grab a beer with the guys later. Nothing exciting." The lies came so easily to him. I wondered how long he'd been practicing. "I should go," I said. "Session's starting. Love you, Margaret. Love you too." The words felt like ash in my mouth, but I said them because Derek expected to hear them, because maintaining the illusion was part of my plan. I spent the day at the conference, taking notes on quarterly reports and new software implementations. But my real focus was on the phone calls I made during breaks. I called our bank, our credit card company, our investment firm. I had legitimate questions about our accounts. I explained, I was thinking of taking a more active role in our finances. The information I gathered was enlightening. Derek had been spending more in the past 6 months, restaurants I'd never been to, hotels during business trips that lasted longer than necessary, a jewelry store purchase for $800 that had never appeared on my finger or around my neck. By the time I returned to Hamilton Grove on Thursday evening, I had a clear picture of my husband's double life. More importantly, I had a plan. Derek was home when I arrived, cooking dinner like the devoted husband he pretended to be. He kissed my cheek, asked about my trip, helped carry my suitcase upstairs. The perfect performance. "How was your week?" I asked, unpacking my clothes. "Quiet, worked late Monday and Tuesday, watched the game Wednesday, missed you though." More lies. On Wednesday, he'd charged dinner for two at Romano's, our anniversary restaurant, the same restaurant where he'd proposed 19 years ago, where we'd celebrated every milestone since. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "I'm glad to be home," I said, and part of me meant it. Home was where I had the advantage now. Home was where I could watch and wait and plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I became an expert in surveillance, not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the subtle art of paying attention. I noticed when Derek showered longer than usual, when he changed his cologne, when he started working late on nights that coincided with charges on our credit card. I learned that Natalie had a routine. She came to our house on Tuesdays and Thursdays when Derek told me he was working late. She stayed for exactly 2 hours, leaving before Derek's usual return time. She parked 3 blocks away and walked, careful not to be seen by neighbors. I learned that Derek kept a second phone in his desk drawer, hidden behind old tax documents. I learned that he'd opened a credit card I didn't know about, that he'd been researching apartment rentals in the next county over. Most importantly, I learned that I felt nothing, no rage, no heartbreak, no desperate desire to save my marriage, just a cold, calculating satisfaction as I gathered evidence like a detective building a case. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in early October. Derek had left for his late meeting, and I was supposed to be at book club. Instead, I sat in my car across the street, watching Natalie's small white Honda park in our driveway. She looked younger than I remembered, moving with the confidence of someone who believed she'd won. She had a key. Derek had given her a key to our house. She let herself in like she belonged there. I drove to the hardware store and had copies made of everything. House keys, mailbox key, Derek's office key that he kept on the same ring. The elderly clerk didn't ask questions, just handed me the copies with a receipt. From there, I went to an electronics store and bought a small recording device. "For lectures," I told the young salesman. "I'm going back to school." The next Thursday, I planted the device in Derek's office before leaving for my fictitious evening plans. When I retrieved it, Friday morning, I had 47 minutes of conversations between my husband and his mistress. The recordings were worse than I'd expected. Not just the physical intimacy, though that was painful enough, but the emotional betrayal. Derek talked about me with casual cruelty, calling me boring, frigid, a burden he'd been carrying for years. "She doesn't suspect anything," he said at one point. "She's completely oblivious. Always has been." Natalie's laugh was light, musical. "How do you stand it, going home to her every night?" "I think of you," Derek replied. "I think of this." There was a long pause filled with sounds I didn't want to identify. "When are you going to tell her?" Natalie asked eventually. "Soon. I'm waiting for the right moment. Maybe after the holidays. I don't want to ruin Christmas." How thoughtful. How considerate. Derek was planning to destroy our marriage on his timeline, at his convenience. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and the recording device, listening to my husband's betrayal on repeat. Each playback hardened something inside me, crystallized my resolve. I wasn't going to confront Derek. I wasn't going to beg him to choose me over her. I wasn't going to play the role of the heartbroken wife, pleading for another chance. Instead, I was going to let him dig his own grave. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Derek announced he was throwing a small dinner party the following Saturday. His boss, a few colleagues, some potential clients, a chance to show off his happy home life, his devoted wife, his picture-perfect marriage. "I'll handle the details," he said. "You just need to be charming." I'd been charming for 18 years. One more night wouldn't kill me. The party was Derek's usual show. He played the attentive husband, refilling wine glasses, telling stories about our early marriage, his hand resting possessively on my shoulder. His boss, a pompous man named Reynolds, complimented Derek on his beautiful wife and lovely home. "You're a lucky man," Reynolds said, raising his glass. "Not everyone finds a woman who can be both a partner and a homemaker." Derek's smile was practiced, perfect. I couldn't agree more. Margaret's been my anchor for 18 years. The lies came so easily to him. I wondered if he'd practiced them, if he'd stood in front of our bathroom mirror perfecting his performance. Natalie wasn't there, of course. She was probably at her apartment, waiting for Derek to text her when the coast was clear, waiting for him to come to her after playing husband for his colleagues. I played my part perfectly. I served dinner, made conversation, laughed at the right moments. I was the ideal corporate wife, supportive and charming and completely forgettable. But as the evening wound down, as Derek's guests prepared to leave, I excused myself to retrieve their coats from the bedroom closet. Instead, I went to Derek's office and retrieved the manila envelope I'd hidden there earlier. Inside were printed screenshots of his text messages with Natalie, copies of his credit card statements, and a USB drive containing the recordings I'd made. I returned to the living room as Reynolds was telling Derek about a potential promotion. Regional manager to district supervisor, more responsibility, more travel, more money. "With your track record and your stable home life, you're the obvious choice," Reynolds was saying. "The company values family men. Derek, men who understand commitment." Derek's chest puffed with pride. "I've always believed that success at home translates to success at work." "Exactly. Your wife is clearly an asset to your career. Hold on to this one." I chose that moment to step forward, the envelope in my hand. "Derek," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He turned to me with mild irritation. "Margaret, can it wait? Mr. Reynolds was just—" "No," I said, setting the envelope on the coffee table between them. "It can't wait." The room went silent. Derek stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "What is this?" he asked. But his voice had changed. The confident executive was gone, replaced by something smaller, more frightened. "I know about Natalie," I said simply. "I've known since the day I came home for my passport." Derek's face went white. Around us, his guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware they were witnessing something private and terrible. "I heard you on the phone," I continued, my voice steady despite the way my heart was hammering. "I heard you tell her you loved her. I heard you plan your evening together while I was supposed to be at the airport." "Margaret, I didn't say anything then because I wanted to be sure. So I gathered evidence, phone records, credit card statements, recordings. It's all in there." Derek reached for the envelope with shaking hands, but I caught his wrist. "Don't," I said. "Not in front of your colleagues. Not in front of the man who just called you a family man." Reynolds cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should go." "No," I said, still looking at Derek. "Stay. Let me tell you about commitment. Mr. Reynolds, let me tell you about the kind of family man you're considering for promotion." Derek's grip on my wrist tightened. "Margaret, stop." 18 years, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. 18 years of marriage, and he's been planning to leave me for his 25-year-old assistant. He's been bringing her to our house, to our bed, while I was at book club. He's been using company credit cards to pay for hotel rooms and jewelry and romantic dinners at restaurants where we celebrated our anniversary. "That's enough," Derek hissed. "No, it's not nearly enough. You want to know about commitment, Mr. Reynolds? Ask Derek about the apartment he's been looking at in Riverside County. Ask him about the second phone he keeps in his desk drawer. Ask him about the key he gave his mistress to our house." The room was dead silent. Reynolds looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "I think we should leave," he said finally. Of course, I replied. But take this with you. I handed him the envelope. In case you need to reconsider that promotion. Derek lunged for the envelope, but Reynolds was already tucking it into his jacket. Don't, Derek said desperately. Sir, please, let me explain. I think you've done enough explaining for one evening, Reynolds said coldly. Gentlemen, we're leaving. The exodus was swift and silent. Within minutes, Derek and I were alone in our living room, the debris of his shattered career scattered around us. How could you do this to me? He said, his voice breaking. How could you humiliate me like this? I stared at him. This man I'd lived with for 18 years, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I didn't humiliate you, Derek. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure the right people knew about it. You don't understand. This was my chance, my promotion, my future. Your future with Natalie, you mean? Don't worry. You'll still have that. You just won't have it on the company's dime. Derek sank into his chair, his head in his hands. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said. I don't want anything from you anymore. I walked to the kitchen and retrieved the suitcase I'd packed earlier. Derek didn't try to stop me as I headed for the door. Where are you going? He called. Away, I said. Far away from you and your lies and your pathetic attempts at playing the victim. Margaret, wait. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can... No, I said, turning back to face him one last time. We can't. Because I don't love you anymore, Derek. I'm not sure I ever did. And I'm certainly not going to spend whatever years I have left pretending otherwise. I drove to the Lakeview Inn, a small hotel 20 minutes outside Hamilton Grove. The desk clerk, a kind woman in her 60s, didn't ask questions when I requested a room for an indefinite stay. Running away from something, honey? She asked gently. No, I said. Running toward something. I'm just not sure what yet. The room was small but clean, with a view of the lake that stretched toward the horizon. I stood at the window, watching moonlight dance on the water, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. My phone buzzed with texts from Derek. Apologies, explanations, promises to change. I deleted them without reading beyond the first few words. There would be lawyers, of course. Paperwork and asset division and all the tedious mechanics of undoing a life. But that could wait. Tonight, I just wanted to stand at this window and remember what it felt like to be free. I thought about the woman I'd been that morning in September, rushing home to grab her passport, believing her biggest adventure was a 3-day business trip. She seemed like a stranger now, someone I'd known long ago but had grown beyond. The woman standing in this hotel room was different, harder, perhaps, certainly more calculating, but also more honest, more real, more alive than I'd been in years. I'd spent 18 years being Derek's wife, Derek's anchor, Derek's convenient domestic accessory. Now I was just Margaret, and that felt like enough. In the morning, I would start over, I would find a new apartment, maybe in a different city. I would figure out what I actually wanted from life beyond the safety of routine and the comfort of being invisible. But tonight, I was content to stand at this window and watch the moonlight on the water and know that I'd chosen myself over comfort, truth over convenience, freedom over the illusion of security. Derek had been right about one thing. I was completely oblivious. But not anymore. Now I saw everything clearly, including the fact that the best revenge wasn't destroying his life. It was building my own. The lake stretched endlessly before me, dark and mysterious and full of possibility. Somewhere out there was a life I'd never imagined, a version of myself I'd never met. I couldn't wait to find her.